Thank you very much for the invitation, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me at Inhorgenta and be here to listen to my small and short talk. As Laurent was mentioning, my name is Donatella, straight from Milano today, and as you can hear also from my accent, I'm a principal consultant at Hill & Co. And at Hill & Co, we really specialize on the strategic growth of our industry. We mainly work on everything that relates to gemstones, jewelry businesses, and we really help and support brands throughout their strategic growth. If I have to describe in a nutshell what is my strength and what Elle likes to mention, my secret weapon, I really enjoy framing creativity, bringing creativity to profitability. So I enjoy very much working with startup brands as well as well-known companies to help them figure out in which way creativity can be streamlined in order to become a successful and profitable business. Next to that, in my work as a principal consultant, I'm also a professor in different universities. So I really take a lot of pleasure in being in class with the new generation, and I have to say that I also learn a lot from those generations. Those generations are really shaping the jewelry today, and we will be talking a lot about this element together. We are talking about millennials, Generation Z, those new kids who are really shaping, shaping the shape of our industry today. I'm also a journalist writing for B2B magazines, so I always have a nice eye on jewelry, on trends, and this keeps me very much up to date today on everything which is happening in our industry. So today I really have the honor, the pleasure, the privilege to be with you and share with you some of the insights that together with our team at Hill & Co, we were able to gather when we published our the Business of Jewelry report. And I will give you some updates about the third quarter that we really presented at the end of last year. So you will see and learn more about the way our business is really developing. And the overall idea and aim for me today is also to show you in which way newcomers, new designers can also find their relevance in this industry and in this business. So first of all, let's start with this picture. This is the cover page of our business report. It's a chain. The overall idea is breaking the chain. What does it mean today? We have seen and we have realized that there has been an amazing change in the overall supply chain. And everything has become extremely shorter in terms of connection between the sources and the final consumer. Everything is happening to be extremely fast, and we also realize that the big luxury groups and also the big players are really trying to shorten this chain in order to really be always in a vertical integration and really being closer as possible to the final consumer. So we will analyze all those transformations, and we will also ask ourselves why this change is happening. Why do we talk about breaking the chain? Because first of all, consumers have changed. They are not anymore slaves to brand. They want to create content. They want to be hero and heroine in everything that relates to jewelry. And they also want to be there and express their taste, their willingness towards buying a product. Also because we have to consider that we have switched from a direct consumer into an omnichannel surrounding. So everything has become seamless, and we also talk about bringing the digital perception in a world that used to be very traditional and very much based to one-to-one interaction. So what is happening in this overall industry? First of all, the good news when it comes to jewelry is that based on the latest report that was released by Alta Gamma, which is the source of luxury companies in Italy but with an international exposure, jewelry is positively growing. Among all the luxury products, jewelry is the only product that has shown a growth, 4.5%, not so huge, but still a positive number. Next to that, everybody talks about China as being a market where, sales are not developing as fast and as good as they used to be. China is still one of the best performing countries for jewelry. And next to that, fashion jewelry is still on the growth. So fashion jewelry is still developing in a very interesting way. Gemstone jewelry business. They are going through an amazing change, an amazing transformation, and they had to change their path in a very quick way. Laboratory-grown diamonds are happening and starting to kind of develop in a very fast way again from an interest point of view from the consumers, and this has extremely changed also the perception of diamonds, and at the same time it has brought to a very interesting new way to look at the industry. Next to that, the supply chain has shortened. We talk about inclusivity, we talk about traceability, we talk about authenticity, and this has really created a very important link between the industry and the consumers. Big players are really striving to vertical integration. They want to be present. And every often we see big player not willing to go through wholesaler, but really trying to go to direct consumer, which has, of course, shortened our supply chain. Next to that, B2B business is also converting to direct consumer business. This is extremely interesting, and also when we will be talking about opportunities for designers, we see that this also opened a very interesting area of interest that it's worth looking at. The change is really very much related to those three important pillars. We talk about technology, consumers, and competition. Technology is impacting our world, our business. We are all slave on one hand of our mobile phones, but at the same time, technology has become a help, a support of the industry. Through technology, we can identify augmented reality platforms. We can use artificial intelligence. We can create apps, metaverse. And at the same time, technological improvement is going hand in hand with the way manufacturing is happening. On one hand, we talk about unique pieces. On the other hand, we talk about serial production that happens when we need to get to large quantity. Consumers are changing. Even millennials, gray population are changing in their approach towards the product. And at the same time, there is a quest for this direct connection that consumers are asking for to brands. And competition. Our market is flooded, I have to say, with jewelry brands. We are sort of flooded with this amazing offer of jewelry brands. So it becomes more and more vital for jewelry brands, being large or being small businesses, to be able to find the right way, the right language to identify their business, their strengths, and their strategy. So what are, the key findings from our Q3 24 report? Objective and adaptable strategy is needed in order to keep on growing. It's important that each brand has a sense, a pulse of what is happening in the industry, but at the same time has a relevant understanding of what they stand for. So it's a time where we, as brand, need to be much more authentic about ourselves, and at the same time we really need to be very transparent and knowledgeable about what we are doing today, with a huge and interesting glance to what we call also the zeitgeist, the spirit of the time, and the very rapid evolution of our consumers. We talk about facing challenges when impulsive decisions are taken. So you will hear me saying a lot, long-term strategies that adapts on a short run only based on pragmatical decision. This is key, and this is a topic that we will get into the further I go ahead with my presentation. Relevant examples of B2B going into direct consumer. This is so interesting, and this is really breaking the chain once again in creating shorter relationship that we have from the brands to the final consumers. So, what is interesting for us today and what is interesting for our overall conversation? First of all, consumer connection. How you can be in touch with your consumer. Storytelling is key. Consumers are fed up of something which is not authentic. They look for the narrative. They look for elements that talk to them and can also be there to make sure that the brand becomes a kind of a companion and a really way to build with them this kind of engagement. The importance of branding. How do you make yourself different? How do you make yourself recognizable? And in which way you creatively develop your unique selling proposition and your value proposition. Branding is the creative way to shape your DNA. And this is more and more important nowadays because of the fast way we all digest information and the way things happen very strongly. Which opens then, one of the main topics I'm happy to share with you today, the opportunity for new designers. You might say, new designers, they struggle, they have issues. We have an issue of budget, of credibility, of being around, communication. Well, the good news is that consumers, and specifically the ultra net worth consumers, though that 3-4% of our overall industry, they look for unique, one-of-a-kind niche designers. So there is a potential for all of you out there, new emerging designers, to create your own niche and be relevant for the industry. So why storytelling as an emotional connection? We have been brought up with all those big brands delving in their tradition, in their heritage, and telling us a story that relates back to 100, 150 years ago. Sometimes this can also be tedious, because sometimes consumers also seek for something new. And maybe they seek for elements of value propositions that are not only related to tradition, to heritage, but they are also related to elements that might be the exclusivity and the uniqueness of the brand. So this is where storytelling becomes very important, and it has an emotional connection because each designer has to find his or her own way to display that to the consumer. And then branding, I went too fast, branding to create trust and identity. Earlier on, I was talking about creative way to shape your DNA. Creative way, which is a constant way to be in connection with the consumer, and it's a constant way to develop your true identity. So, in our report, we also wrote and spent time also to identify what would be for us the practical steps for emerging designer. In this arena that I was describing, with a lot of jewelry businesses, in an arena which is fastly changing, and at the same time, when we think today, the audience is made up at least of 5-6 different profiles of consumers. We also have to consider not only the Gen Z, but we have to consider the Alpha generation. Those kids that are born after 2010, they are teenagers today. They are the TikTok generation. They have a way to interact with brands which is completely different from the way millennials baby boomer had. So here it's super, super important to identify your core audience, who you are talking to, who you are addressing, and in which way you will make sure that your promise as a brand becomes relevant to that kind of target audience. Then, build and redefine your brand story. This is what we see happening. Very often we have brands that stay very still into their promises. They don't adjust, they don't change according to what is happening in the business. This is nowadays, unfortunately, a big issue. It needs to be refined, and this is where, as a kind of an advice that we'd like to share with young designers, make sure that you keep on refining your brand story, still with your value proposition in mind. Use virtual storytelling. The new generation don't read as much as my generation used to read. They have no time. They scroll, right? And they want to be engaged by those vibrant images. They really want to be engaged by photos, pictures, emotion, which are tangible, palpable, and at the same time, they want to be part of that. They want to be part of the story. And this is where, the usage of storytelling from a visual point of view will really help create this interesting bond with those. Leverage social media and influencers. It's not only a matter to work and have a dialogue with big influencers, with more than 1 million followers. Micro-influencers, local influencers could also be the way for young brands to be in relationship with this digital world and have a way which comes consistent from social media point of view. And here comes the interesting news. B2B is reshaping itself. B2B used to be somehow a business that was mainly designing according to consumer needs, mainly designing according to what customers were asking for. Today, B2B, because they want also to stretch into what is direct consumer, they ask for new designer identity. And this is where young designers could have an interesting relevance, suggesting and proposing themselves to go and design capsule collection that could be interesting to team up with different manufacturers. Also, when it comes to B2B, we can also talk about small-scale retailers, small-scale department stores. Those realities, they always look for private labels. They always look for capsule collection. They always look for new ideas that they can really bring to market in order to enhance their presence to the crowd. And this is where, once again, it becomes extremely interesting for young designer to be in connection with them. It's a way to build on your reputation. It's a way to build also on your professionality. It's a way to build on your maturity. And it also helps from a profitability point of view to start getting money to then build on your own brand and identity. Something else which is interesting and important, and this is where, when I happen to work with young brands, and I also work even with my students, because in my life as a consultant, I also do a lot of mentorship in Saudi Arabia, in Latin America, and so on. I always say to my students, to my young crowd, be very, very relevant also to your profit margin. The ROI, return on investment. It's a word that doesn't sound very sexy, but it's a word that really needs to be taken into consideration where you build your business. And here, you also see Hill & Co, the list, and I will share with you at the end of my presentation also the QR code. We have created a list of more than 20,000 key opinion leaders in the industry. And with this list, you get access to all those names and connections that could also be interesting and relevant at the very beginning of your development of your career. Just a few examples, very quickly. I was talking about emotional storytelling. I don't know if you are familiar with this very interesting case with Levian. Levian was able to give seductive codes to brown diamonds. In our way of handling diamonds, we know out of our experience that brown diamonds are not easily selling as well compared to colored diamonds, white diamonds. Levian patented their brown diamonds with the name chocolate diamond. And as you can see in the picture, one of the pictures was not only with the jewelry, but it was really very much showing how much those diamonds could also look like chocolate. And this was an amazing way to bring to market brown diamonds, and it became a very interesting success. Also, when we talk about mega trends, what is happening all around us, and like the previous talk I was listening to was all about sustainability, traceability, and so on. You have many interesting designers who are actually working into this idea of circular economy, and they are upscaling, recycling, giving new life to vintage and antique jewelry. So those two examples show us how you can be relevant in this industry, fighting against the big giants. Because I know very often, this is the challenge, very often this is really the threat that you have, but this is something which becomes important in finding the right way, the right niche, and the right way to bring it to market. So if we have to really chart a path for future success, if we had to give, the ingredients somehow on top of our mind, as I was mentioning, adapting to changing the supply chain. So really being able to manage the technology, understanding the supply chain, and finding, in which right angle you could really act. Next to that, the collaboration for mutual benefit, which is what I was mentioning about collaboration with B2B or small retailers. And always measuring your progress, which really becomes key in identifying your business and what you want to bring to market. Iconic brand-product combination. To me, this is key whenever you start your business. Iconicity stands for something that people can relate to, but at the same time, it becomes a must-have. And it's a must-have that it's also very much related to the product combination. The way you bring your idea not only on a design, but the way you bring it to a product, and also the way the product is really declined into different silhouettes, SKUs, that makes sense to the consumer. A clear and written brand vision. Positioning, basing yourself with your DNA and unique proposition. Very often, startups, I'm sorry to say, don't study the market. And at the same time, they stand with a very local view, and they don't get the overview of all the different layers we have at marketplace, and next to that, all the different clusters. So I often make my first question to those brands, it's really, where do you position yourself? Where is your unique selling proposition? And when it comes to competition, who are you competing with? Who is next door doing most probably the same things? And how can you make sure that you are more valuable, more interesting than your competition? So this is key, and this is part of the manifesto that each brand has to write at the very beginning of their path. Brand image and tone of voice. Once you have defined your essence, once you have defined your values, you have to define your language and the way you will be expressing your essence. There are different ways. You can be very subtle, very minimal. You can be very redundant. You can be very sparkling, very glittering. You can be very sustainable, very authentic. There are many assets that you can take into consideration that will help to really identify what is your DNA, and what is your value proposition. Customer-centric approach. This is the big shift. Customer will not be cheated anymore. Customer know, they have a knowledge, they have an understanding, even though they don't read much, they get to know, they get informed. And they have different sources of information that we might have my generation, right? So the approach really needs to be pleasing to what they have in mind and what they wish to see in your brand. They want to know the why, the what, and the when. And this is key and extremely important. 3 years plan strategy. I know, I love always to go back to finance, to numbers, but this is important. Give yourself a long-term strategy and always go back every 6 months at least to overview where you stand with your numbers, and at the same time always look at what is happening around us, because the world is changing. The mega trends are really affecting strongly the overall industry, and this is also why you really need to creative shaping your branding in a proper way. More to that, strong digital and social media communication. Choose your way, choose your output, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, you name all those different channels, all those different touch points, but they are vital because they will be helping you to identify your core business, your brand. Strong customer relation. Even though you are a small brand, you need to be sharp in the way you supply your consumer. They don't need to be, how can I say, not feeling comfortable with the way you are bringing the product to market. And you will see how many touch points are related to that and how important this becomes. For online purposes, superior experience, personalization, easy try on, and this is once again where we see technology becoming such an amazing resource and such an amazing help really to develop this customer journey in a proper way. Update your website. This might sound a little bit kind of silly. You say, what is she saying to us? This is important also. Don't have your website made and then 3 years later still the same images, the same text, the same information. People scroll, people look, they get into what you deliver in terms of communication and content, and they always look for the vibrancy, for the newness, for something that talks to them and makes your brand extremely innovative and interesting for them. And then, the e-commerce, the state of the art, using really the smart omnichannel. Because we are not talking anymore in jewelry about going to store, the brick and mortar way of buying that, of course, up until COVID was the common way to buy jewelry. Since COVID, all brands have gone digital. Even stores, they now develop their commerce, through WhatsApp, through Zoom, conversation, and so on. So here again, we talk, might seem to you a big word, omnichannel, but it's also true that at the end of the day, you really have to take close consideration of your consumer need. And then focus on global pricing and really commercial strategy. What do I mean here? It goes again into what I mentioned, being pragmatical, looking at your positioning, and at the same time looking at what your competition is doing. You cannot be out of market with your prices. You need to be able to do your markup strategy in a way which is then consistent to the price point you want to reach because of the market positioning you have selected. So you see, this is a kind of a mental gymnastic, as I always call it, which is very important. So on one hand, it's more about the perceived value, but it's also related to the marginality, the profitability that you can get that will help you keep up going with the business and with your return on investment. Find your unique value proposition. You are the only one doing a specific kind of jewelry. And this is where once again, you really need to be not only pragmatical, but also humble in looking at your brands and at the same time mirroring your brands compared to what is there on the market. Develop a coherent brand strategy, connect with your customer, lean into captivating storytelling, leverage your social media, and consider possible collaboration. Next to that, measure your progress. So in a nutshell, creativity plus business means success, which goes back to what I was mentioning at the very beginning, what I love doing, framing creativity with profitability. Each designer today has his or her strengths. Each designer has its role in this industry. We see, as I was mentioning, that breaking the chain means that everything gets more reduced, shorter, and this where, there is a very, very interesting moment and potential for new brands to come up, and at the same time also for very well-known brands to reshape themselves according to the market needs. So thank you very much for your attention. I know that I was a little bit late compared to my half an hour, which were 25 minutes, I know, so sorry.
No problem at all.
If there are questions, I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, we have time for a question if anybody has a question or a comment. No? Okay. Thank you. If there is a question, I think Donatella will still be here for a few minutes. You're welcome to just
Absolutely,
go up to her and
with
ask
pleasure. And
right,
I'm also sharing with you the QR code, as I was mentioning, for The List and the platform for the 20,000 key opinion leaders.